Today on the Bass Channel, we're taking a deep dive into the SansAmp Bass Driver DI V2 from Tech 21. The SansAmp Bass Driver DI has been an arsenal staple for players and studios almost since the day it was introduced in 1994. This multifunctional pedal dials up vintage tube tones, bright modern slap sounds, gnarly distortions, and just about any other tone in between. It features 3 different outputs to drive power amps, recording desks, PA mixers, or to simply help shape and enhance your current rig. What separates V2 from the original is the addition of bass and mid-shift buttons. Since the original bass driver's conception, 5-string basses have risen tremendously in popularity. The Bass Driver V2 adds a switch to adjust the bass frequency to better suit those lower registers. There's also a new mid-range control and a switch to adjust its frequency. Let's start by breaking down the front panel controls. Starting from the left, Level adjusts the output of both the 1/4 inch and XLR outputs, while Blend controls the ratio of the SansAmp circuit and your direct instrument signal. When the blend is at minimum, the SansAmp tube emulation circuit is bypassed, but the mid, bass, treble, and level controls all remain active. The treble, mid, and bass knobs are active controls. Unlike passive controls that only cut, these active tone controls cut or boost plus or minus 12 dB from the 12 o'clock position. Presence brings out the upper harmonic content and attack. For a smoother high end and clean settings, decrease this knob to taste. The drive knob adjusts the input sensitivity as well as the overall amount of gain and overdrive, similar to when the output section of a tube amp is being pushed. mid-shift switch changes the frequency from 500 Hz in the up position to 1000 Hz when depressed. The overall output level will change relative to your EQ settings, so adjust the level control accordingly to compensate. The bass shift switch changes the frequency from 40 Hz in the up position to 80 Hz when pressed down to accommodate 5 and 6 string basses that extend into lower registers. This can help keep the low end from getting too muddy or boomy. Rounding out the front panel features is a minus 20 decibel pad for the XLR output, a plus 10 dB boost for the quarter-inch output, and a phantom and ground connect switch. Phantom power allows you to tap into the power of a suitably equipped mixer. As the 3-conductor XLR sends the audio signal to the input of a mixer, the mixer sends voltage back to the unit via the same 3 wires, eliminating the need for an external power supply. For live and studio use, let the engineer know your SansAmp Bass Driver is phantom power operable. So now that we know what the knobs do, how does this pedal incorporate into your rig? The Bass Driver DI has 1 quarter-inch input and 3 independent outputs. The quarter-inch output labeled as out lets you run the pedal as a preamp or a stomp box. To use as a preamp, run the quarter-inch output of the Bass Driver directly into the power amp input or the effects return of your amp. This will bypass the tone coloring preamp section of the amp rig. To use this pedal as a stomp box, run the quarter-inch output into the front input of your amp the same way you would with any other pedal. To drive a power amp, run the quarter-inch output or the XLR output to the corresponding input of a power amp and adjust your stage volume with the level control of the pedal. To record direct, plug the XLR or quarter-inch output directly into the input of your mixer or recorder. From here, you can use the input trim control on your mixer or recorder to make sure that the pedal is not overloading the recording device, but if the level on the SansAmp is below the 12 o'clock position and still overloading the board, use the respective output level switch to reduce the output. Keep in mind, full-range systems yield a wide frequency response, therefore it's typically best to start with the EQ levels at 12 o'clock and then increase or decrease to taste. Quarter-inch unbalanced parallel output is hardwired parallel with the input jack. The instrument signal passes through the SansAmp completely unaffected to the input of your amp or whatever you're using for stage amplification. You can use the parallel output in conjunction with the XLR or quarter-inch outputs to hear your amp on stage while sending the SansAmp signal to front of house. This next example is taken from a live clip that runs all three outputs simultaneously. The XLR is recording the direct signal just like every other tone sample in this video and represents what the front of house engineer will hear. The quarter-inch output is running into the effects return of a Hartke LH500 and HD410 mic'd with a Beta 52 and SM57. This is how you would use the SansAmp as a preamp. The parallel output is running into an Ampeg SVT with matching 810 cabinet mic'd with a 4038 ribbon mic. So if you love the sound of your amp but it doesn't feature a direct output, this is how you can still send a great sounding signal to front of house while still hearing your amp in all of its glory. The speaker simulation is an integral part of the SansAmp tube amplifier emulation circuitry. Tech 21 specifically designed it for a smooth, even response just like you would get with a cabinet with multiple microphones. It doesn't have the peaks, valleys, and notches associated with single miking and mini IRs, and will complement any type of bass speaker cabinet system. Here are some other interesting things to note about the Bass Driver DI. First, the SansAmp Bass Driver DI is an interactive tool that will react differently to various signal levels as well as your individual touch. For example, a hotter signal and a heavy hand will increase the gain structure and result in more overdrive, where a softer signal and a lighter touch decreases the gain structure for a cleaner sound. By using presence, drive, and the EQ controls, you can achieve the proper mix of tonality and gain structure that best suits your style. If you want the high end to be cleaner and smoother, increase the treble control and decrease presence. But if you want more overdrive, increase presence and decrease treble. This will bring out the upper harmonic content and attack. As you increase treble, the high frequency content increases without changing the harmonic content. When you push the bass driver to saturation, you get enhanced harmonics just as you would with an overdriven tube amp. Depending on the setting, the circuit limits transient peaks for an even meter reading so that outboard compressors or limiters may not be necessary. The bass driver DI runs on a standard 9-volt alkaline battery or a 9-volt center negative DC power supply. The power consumption is approximately 6 milliamps and the input activates the battery, so make sure you unplug when not in use. If you plan on using phantom power, you'll need a minimum of 24-volt DC regulated, but 48-volt DC regulated is the minimum needed to illuminate the LED. So I recently asked our subscribers to give me their opinion on the SansAmp Bass Driver, and while we don't have time to read each one, here are a few that sum up the general consensus. The first comment actually comes from our friend AMP the bass player, and he says, "It's cheap, easy to find on the used market, and works for just about any context. The blend, EQ, and DI out make it a solid choice for any player who needs a preamp. It's a massively important piece of gear that you never turn off once it's switched on. I like the presence and blend knobs, but overall it's a great DI preamp. I parked my amp in the rehearsal room and use it live and to record at home. It sounds like a real amp, a big amp, and not like a distortion pedal that happens to have an XLR. I just love how you can have the sound of a mic'd SVT and an 810 in a tiny little box and run it straight to the desk." And the negative feedback was actually few and far between, with one comment saying, "I know it's part of the sound of the unit, but I wish you could turn off the baked-in cab sim sound for just a little bit more flexibility." And another saying, "I've never been able to get a pleasing tone out of a SansAmp pedal, especially involving cabinets with tweeters." Obviously, there is no universally loved product that will work perfectly with everyone, but the SansAmp Bass Driver seems to be about as close as you can get. So let me know your thoughts on the SansAmp Bass Driver DI down in the comments below, and if you like this video, consider subscribing or becoming a channel member. Until next time, be safe, and I'll see you later.